Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. So, depending on whether or not I choose to upload the second, not even technically, it's the first video that I was initially planning to upload today, which is another unscripted video. I'm gonna upload another unscripted video because I just watched this video from Traitor. Uh, it says here Demon Slayer Hinokami Chronicles 2 is doomed, and now you know I'm a YouTuber, so I'm already aware of like titling videos and stuff like that. I'm not really gonna fixate too much on this, because obviously it's way too early to actually talk about whether or not a game is doomed or not. But I do want to talk about the actual concern he has, and then it has to do with frame rate. And this is something that I briefly talked about in my initial video talking about Demon Slayer 2. But I think I want to elaborate a little bit more here because there's a lot that I want to tackle. And so here's the thing. Um, his main concern is something that so I think there are two different concerns he has, and I think both of them are very valid. So the first one, and this is something that a lot of us that play, like, personally speaking, I'm mostly speaking from the perspective of someone who has played the Storm games for a long time at 30 FPS, and it was only recently, and by recently I'm talking about 2017. Not that I actually had those games in 2017, but like I'm speaking just in general from a historical viewpoint. It was only in like around 2017 when we actually started to see these games like being like run at 60 FPS when they got ported to PC, and there has been a lot of problems as a result of this. Now, a lot of times people talk about Storm 4, but I'm going to tell you right now, Storm 4 is not even the worst victim of this. Storm 1, 2, and 3, holy fuck. Those games were really impacted by the game running at 60 FPS because it's not just the physics of the game, like just the overall because the thing about because this is something that happens a lot when you develop a game that was primarily meant for 30 FPS and you bump it up to 60 FPS, it's gonna break things. Like it's inevitable. Like this is something that's gonna end up happening in some way or another. This isn't necessarily like an easy thing to fix. Cause I believe even like Yakuza Kiwami 2, I remember that game. Um that was an example of a game where some people like unironically would rather play the game at 30 FPS because playing the game at 60 FPS actually ruins some combos because the opponents react a little bit faster with some movements or some attacks, and so this isn't necessarily like an easy because I want to make it clear that like I'm not trying to fucking shit on CyberConnect 2 for these things happening, like where sometimes running like running the game at 60 FPS will suddenly like make certain combos like run finish or run at like a different speed than 30 FPS, and that could end up ruining the timing of certain things. And sometimes it's not even just about the physics, sometimes it's also about the frame time because you are like playing at like a much lower latency because 60 FPS is like 16.6 milliseconds, and 30 FPS is like I think it's 33 or something like that. And so there's the input latency and then there's the actual physics. Like both of them can be affected, and this is something that will inevitably happen when you change the frame rate. Like this isn't me like shitting on CyberConnect 2 for that, but it is something that does fucking happen. And when you have a competitive game where you know a lot of us build metas for games, we build like guides, we build like combo videos, we build like tutorials on how to like pull certain mix-ups and how to react to certain things. When we also spend a lot of time playing games and getting used to just the overall frame rate of the game, having to switch between 30 and 60 is just impossible or very tough. And that's why Demon Slayer, when that thing got a 60 FPS patch, a lot of people stuck with 30 FPS because playing at 60 FPS fundamentally changed so many fucking characters that a lot of people were like, dude, I've been playing this game for at like 30 FPS for like so long that, you know, I can't change. I just can't fucking change. Even Storm 4. Like, I remember, like, I think even before Storm Connections came out, I still remember seeing a lot of fucking videos of people playing on PC who are playing it at 30 FPS because they're used to that frame rate. And so this is a real issue. Like, I definitely do understand that. And the thing is, Demon Slayer Hinokami Chronicles, the first game, their solution for online matches, at least in rank, was to just simply lock it to 30. Now, I don't like that solution at all because I don't want to play games at 30 FPS, especially fighting games. I do not in any way want to fucking play games at 30 FPS. And so, I never really liked that solution. I do prefer Storm Connection solution, in which they're like, hey, if you only want to play with PS5 players, then fine. Toggle this setting and you'll only play against people who are playing the game at 60 FPS. And so I like that solution better, but there are downsides. And I think this is one of the things that Traitor points out in this video, which is the fact that it ends up creating a division between players because there are a lot of people that are going to play this game at 30 FPS on their PlayStation 4. There are also going to be a lot of people that are going to play this game at 60 FPS on either PC or PlayStation 5. The only solution, like legitimately the only fucking solution that CyberConnect 2 can come up with that'll make everyone happy would be to add a 60 FPS mode on PlayStation 4. The problem is that I don't think that's gonna happen because I can't really imagine the PlayStation 4 running this Unreal Engine game at like 60 FPS. Honestly, a lot of it is just it's not even really the graphics that's necessarily the problem. I think it's just the CPU. I just can't really, because even if they, I don't know, even if they were like, let's like put the graphic settings to like low or like change the resolution to like 720p or something like that, I think I have a feeling that the CPU would probably still be the bottleneck because the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One have pretty fucking weak CPUs. And so I I I, I have a suspicion that making those games run at 60 FPS uh maybe wouldn't be impossible, but I don't think it's gonna happen. I don't think it's gonna fucking happen, and that's a shame. And so, yeah, this could potentially. I mean, I don't think it's potentially. I think it will be a problem. But here's my take. Here's my personal problem. I actually no, it's not even really a problem. It's just really just a personal perspective, and I guess where I'm gonna start is the where to start off. Do I think it was a mistake making this game available for PlayStation 4? And the answer to that is no. And the reason why I don't think it's a mistake is that while I understand why some people might make the argument that hey, this is gonna end up creating a division between PlayStation 4 and 5 players where they're going to exclude each other. Uh, that is true, but at the same time, I think a bigger exclusion would just be to completely rule out PlayStation 4 players in general. And I don't really agree with that. Now, here's the thing, I get it. It's been a couple of years since the PS5 and Xbox Series X came out. At this point, like especially with other generation of consoles, we would have seen many games just abandon old gen. But the thing is, I'm someone who has a much more laxed take when it comes to this. My opinion has always been, hey, if this game can run on older platforms, I don't really blame developers for making it available there. Because look, there are a lot of fucking people out there that still only have a PlayStation 4. Like, like I was talking to someone I know in real life. Like we were planning to like fucking um have like a like we're like in the coming days we're planning to like hang out at their apartment, and they don't have a PlayStation 5. Like they don't have it. They only have a PlayStation 4, and they have their own reasons for why they only have a PlayStation 4. And yeah, like I don't, and the thing is, I feel like the current landscape of video games is different than before. Like I feel like there was a time when I think it made more sense to video game developers to just completely abandon older gen. Like for example, if we're talking about like between PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3, between PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, these consoles, what made them different isn't just how powerful they are, but it's also just how they're different, like architectural wise. Like the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 are very different in terms of its processor, like just the overall how it's designed. The same is true between the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4. But PlayStation 4, it's based on x86 CPU architecture. It's literally like an AMD APU. You know what I mean? Same is true with PS5. It's a x86 CPU that's inside there based on AMD graphics. Like it has a much more standardized hardware inside, and so making games simultaneously between these two generations, I imagine it's not as hard as it was before. It kind of allows these developers to continue porting these games for older consoles if the engine still allows them to run these games at like the with the fucking AMD Jaguar CPUs that were had their own issues. But yeah, like to me, it's one of those cases where I don't blame them because again, I still think there are a lot of people that own PlayStation 4s and are not planning to upgrade. And to those people, do I think they deserve to just not have the game be available to them? Because at the end of the day, when you look at the trailer for Hinokami Chronicles 2, it doesn't seem to be that crazy different from at least graphics wise. Like, I'm not gonna talk about the overall gameplay because we don't really know anything about it. But in terms of like the graphics, like we saw the cutscenes, it really doesn't seem to be that fucking different from the first game. And so, if it's not gonna be that different, like why exclude the PlayStation 4 platform? Like I don't blame them for doing that. But is this going to have, negative consequences? It will. Some people say, the game's being held back in terms of, it's just the whole classic argument that, oh, older gen is holding back newer gen. Like these new consoles are not having like their maximum potential being tapped. But I think that's bullshit. I think if we actually look at games that are exclusive to next gen, where is the quote unquote untapped potential? A lot of these games are not these huge technological uplifts. Like aside from ray tracing, which I don't even think ray tracing is even impacting these games visually that hard. Like honestly, I'm more impressed with Lumen than I am with ray tracing, and even then, it's Lumen with like a lot of post processing effects on top of it that can sometimes really fucking make a game look crazy realistic. But like if even then, like again, like what I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't really believe in the whole untapped potential thing. I think a lot of games, I think there are a lot of fucking games out there that, you know like I'm thinking of 2D fighters, like pixel animated 2D fighters, visual novels, even some JRPGs, especially anime especially like a lot of anime based JRPGs that I don't think they typically push technology, PC gaming hardware that crazy amount as far as like quote unquote tapping the maximum potential of them. And so these types of games, I don't think they really need to be exclusive to the latest gen, at least in my opinion. And so that's kind of the perspective that I have when it comes to this, and I feel the same way about Hinokami Chronicles too. But again, I do acknowledge that this will create a division, and if you ask me, I think this, personally speaking, should just kind of be a moment where a lot of people should have that wake up call moment, because honestly, there can be differences between the PlayStation 4, like sorry, there can be differences between playing the game at 30 FPS and 60 FPS. We will see a lot of like these physics and timing differences that between the two. But honestly, a lot of these differences are only noticeable when you play the game like one after the other. Like me personally, like my overall experience playing Hinokami Chronicles, the first game has been at 60 FPS. I don't really play the game at 30 FPS, and so if someone tells me that when they play at 60 FPS they notice something, I'm just gonna tell them, well, I don't know what that is because I don't play the game at 30 FPS. And so honestly, I feel like the ultimate solution is always going to be, hey, maybe it's time to upgrade to a PS5 or Xbox Series, or upgrade your PC. I think ultimately that's the real end goal for a lot of people. And I do believe this is happening. Like we are seeing people upgrade to newer gen, and so I think this is a problem that's probably not going to persist for too long, as we're going to see more and more people just have the latest fucking consoles, but there are still going to be some people that have older ones, and those people are probably going to be excluded from some matches, and some they might not like there we are going to see a lot of like awkward scenarios. Like one of them that Traitor mentioned was a situation where I he had to play against someone who was running the game at 30 FPS, and that ended up creating a lot of fucking awkwardness. And I think moments like these are gonna happen, but I think that in the end, because I always like one thing that I've learned over the past couple of years when it comes to the FGC community is that when there are struggles, when there are these like setbacks, we do eventually overcome them. Like think of, for example, Hinokami Chronicles with its awful netcode and just how bad it was. We in many ways overcame it. Like even if it meant like Globeku hosting his own like dedicated remote servers, like to run to in order to in order for the game to play like remotely. Initially I think he was hosting him himself through his computer, but then eventually he started paying for Amazon cloud services. That was a lot of fucking dedication that he put for this game, because it was a game that he cared about. He wanted to see the competitive scene grow, and so honestly, I think this whole 30 to 60 FPS thing is something that I think it's less hard to deal with compared to some of the struggles that we've had over the years. I think this is something that we're gonna overcome, especially because if there's something that I've learned with seeing a little bit of what's happening with Storm Connections, is that it does seem like a lot of people, you know, are choosing to play at 60 FPS, because I think 60 FPS is objectively the better option. We're not gonna see a lot of people that have like a good enough PC to run the game at 60 FPS or PlayStation 5 choosing to play the game at 30 FPS. Like that is not gonna you're not gonna see this happen like very frequently. I think that only happened with Hinokami Chronicles because the game initially didn't have 60 FPS. Like this was a game that initially ran like on all platforms ran at 30 FPS, and it only got a 60 FPS patch later, and by that point a lot of people were used to playing at 30 FPS. But I don't think that's going to happen with Hinokami Chronicles 2. I think this game will run at 60 FPS day 1, and no one's going to want to fucking go back to playing it at 30. Even the people that already played the game, like even the people that have already built up their skills with the first game, are probably also gonna play at 60 FPS, because at the end of the day the game's gonna change anyway, and so they're gonna have to fucking learn the game from ground up anyways, and so they might as well learn how to play the game at 60 FPS. And so that's what I personally believe is gonna happen. I'm not too concerned about this, and I will say though that I do believe, at least with Hinokami Chronicles 3, I think they probably should abandon the PlayStation 4. But for this game, I'm not gonna begrudge them too hard. Like again, the game doesn't seem to look that different from the first one, and so I'm gonna cut them some slack here, even though I definitely do think that they should consider abandoning the PS4. But if they don't want to do it now, I'm not really gonna get too mad at them. Like so, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my perspective. Yeah, that's all.